I want to tell you all about the log cabin style blanket. I discovered this a couple of years ago and I hadn't come across it before that, and I was immediately fascinated by it. It's a very, very interesting modular construction type where you can control the colors, you can control the size, you can even control how it fits together. I think it would be more traditionally associated with quilting, but it actually translates really well into knitting. The types of garter stitch, the types of log cabins that I've come across before are garter stitch. And the reason for that is the garter stitch is very square. So 2 rows is pretty much equivalent to 1 stitch across. So it makes it a lot easier to create squares with it, or very modular constructions. And the way you would traditionally work a log cabin is you'll make a garter stitch square, bind it off. It can be any color you want, because of course you can do it all in the same color. You can use a rainbow of colors, you can use scraps you've got, whatever you want. But once you've finished it, you bind it off, and then either the same color or a new one, you turn the square to the side, pick up stitches along the edge of the square you've just worked, and then you knit your new garter stitch strip. So this time it's a strip. It's usually not very wide, and it is the depth of the rows that you worked on that. So you say you work 10 rows, 20 rows, whatever it might be. When you finish that, you bind it off, and then you do the same thing again. You turn to the side and you pick up stitches. So this time it's the edge of the strip you've just done, and it'll be the cast on of the original square. You pick up the stitches, you work the same width as before in whatever color you want, and then you bind off and you turn. And you're probably starting to get what's happening with this now. You keep working the same width, but picking up as many stitches as you need for the edging that's presented when you turn your work. So it creates kind of a square spiral really, of knitting going round and round, where you bind off, pick up stitches, work the same width. So this means that you can use kind of any colors you want. You can actually, by doing a couple of ones that are the same, you create shapes a little bit. I view it a little bit like Tetris shapes. And then you've got options as to how it gets fit together, because if you want one big one, you can just keep doing that with the strips getting bigger and bigger as you go out. But of course you do have a much bigger blanket when you're done, and it's going to be a square. So what you can do that's a little bit more useful, I think, is do a series of smaller squares, whether it's very small or medium size, where they're square shapes, and then you fit those together and you can seam them in whatever way you want. So that allows you to vary the amount of squares, which means that you can change the size of the blanket. So in the club we're going to be looking at, we're going to have a lap, a throw size, and a bedspread size, and that the base size of them is going to remain the same, and the only difference between them is how many you're going to have in each one. So having it as a square basis means that you've got a lot more control over that. Now obviously what I've just told you about is the more basic or more traditional log style cabin. But what we're doing is making it our own by moving a little away from just garter stitch. There will still be some garter stitch, but what I'm starting to introduce with our log cabin for the Blanket Club 25 is we're also going to be adding some Gansey, which would be knit and purl style stitches. So they're going to add texture, they're going to add little motifs and just knit and purl patterns through it. There's a couple of things that were both interesting and a challenge, depending on which way you want to look at it, for me with this. The biggest one being that when you're doing something that's more stockinette stitch based, the gauge is going to be quite different. The gauge is going to pull in a little bit more than garter stitch, but there's less rows. So that means that in order to make it work, I kind of had to play around with needle sizes, with the variety of different rows and things like that. So that's going to be what the club will be exploring, taking a look at the basic construction and then how you introduce other stitches into it in a way that allows them to lie flat but still gives you a lot of control over how you can place those different panels, and so you can mix and match the different styles as you go through. So that's how I've ended up making it my own in this one. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this construction style. I think one of the biggest advantages of it is that you're never knitting more than a small section at a time. And that means that it's like popcorn knitting. It's like, I'm just going to knit this strip. I'm just going to knit this strip. And what I did find with it as I was knitting through it is that I batched them a lot. So before when I was traveling and I wanted something really easy, I just took the center square one and I just knit all of the center squares. And then the same with the next time round, I took all of those ones and I did the first couple of strips in one color. So it meant that it's very easy to both travel with, and you can kind of batch certain sections of it. And you've got a lot of satisfaction because when you finish a strip and you bind off, there's a sense of completion, even though you haven't finished the whole blanket. You've got little small goals that you can achieve all the way along as you're progressing.